So welcome everybody. It's really great to have you back again for an all-new Process Mining Café. Our Process Mining Café today will be about change management. And change management is a really nice topic for Process Mining Café because I'm convinced, I know that we Process Miners, we can all learn a lot from change management and process improvement professionals. And at the same time, there are also opportunities where process mining can support change management in different places. And we want to talk about both of these perspectives here today. And to do this, I have invited two guests who are not only familiar with process mining, but who are also change management experts. So here they are. Welcome, Sebastiaan. Welcome, Roger.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, hello, everybody. Welcome.
Very good to have you here. So just to introduce you a little bit, Sebastiaan van Rijsbergen is a project and change manager at Nationale-Nederlanden. And Roger Schmid is business transformation manager at Stryker. And now, before we start, let's talk a little bit about maybe why change management is important in your own work and how you think about that. Maybe Sebastiaan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I will give a small introduction of that because I work as a project manager and I'm quite experienced in the topic of change management. And a few years before, I worked as I did a Lean Six Sigma project, so a big process improvement project with commercial conversion, so the conversion of pension contracts from old systems to new systems. And I was doing that with quite a big project team, and I was doing that in the Lean Six Sigma way, so in a classical way with brown papers, process, all the process drawings, expert guesses, etc., etc. And during that project, I came in contact with Anna and Process Mining, and for me, process mining was a real great concept, and I was really curious about how it worked. And a little bit later, I went to a 2-day course, and Anna told me everything about process mining, so I knew everything. And for me, because I was busy with the project, for me it was quite easy to implement process mining. That's what I thought. And I started because I knew the process very well, the team I knew even better, and I was able to get the right data quite easily because we had our own dedicated workflow system. So I started really enthusiastic, and I made my own analysis purely on myself, and I started to present all the results and the analysis I made, and I thought, the team will be very happy with the results and with the conclusions I have about the process. But they weren't happy at all. And that was strange because we worked before in a very good way and we did a lot of improvements. So I thought, what's going on here? And what I learned from this story was that change management, doing it in the right way, is really important. So it was important for the team to understand how process mining worked. So we did some steps back, and we started with explaining how process mining worked. We started with analyzing one case at a time, and then we went further, step by step, implementing it. So for me, it's a real important learning school that knowing everything about the tool is important, but doing the right way, change management, is also important, even in an environment which is really familiar for you. So I knew the process well, I knew the team well, the data for me was clear, but doing change management is important, and it takes quite a lot of time before people are trusting the data and are familiar with the possibilities of process mining.
Yeah, I see Roger is nodding a lot here, so you recognize this, right, Roger? What is your experience?
Yeah, Sebastiaan, welcome in the club with the brown paper exercise. That was always a big challenge for all entire people during the change, and that learning curve it was also important. So from my side, I think change management is an integral part of my daily work. I'm a business transformation manager since around about 20 years in individual streams, in aviation and medical devices. And during this journey, I always in contact with the strategy of the company, the structure, the organization, and the culture in each department. And that was for me personal, always a good journey. How the people are thinking and what are their behavior behind them. And the main thing, we all have not enough lifetime. So that was my point. Why we have not enough lifetime during this journey. That is the way we should always know what we are doing during a change. So that helps in improving our lifetime. So that's the basically how can improve my lifetime or the lifetime of every individual during a journey with process mining or the biggest change in the company. And it's also important so how we can a sustainable orientated way. And that's the two important things, the purpose and the driver during a journey with the people and individual streams of a company or in an organization. But at the end of the day, it's always the same story, never give up. And change management it's absolutely incredible, great with this story, never give up from my side.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe before we continue, can you explain a little bit more what you mean with lifetime is a concept?
That's more so. It's when I start the work day at the day. So it is what is the goal of the day at the end of the day. So it's for me more so a self-reflecting. Okay, which systems are into place, and these are select which tools and what results we achieve today. At the end of the day, it's for me important the rest of the day, the time of a day, so that it's for me the best thing or the summarize of how we can refine the improving or how we can enable the people that works with the system or the tools in the company.
Yeah. Okay, great, very good. Well, that's an excellent start. So before we go in more detail about all kinds of change management topics, I want to remind you all that you can participate in the discussion, and we would very much like to hear your points as well. Because what we have been doing, Sebastiaan, Roger, and me, is that we have each collected 5 points. It's a little bit of a wild mix of success factors, tips, also flops, things you shouldn't do. So it's about things we have learned or experiences we have made that we think are useful to share here in this context. And we will make a round, and each of us share our first one, and then each of us share our second point, and so on and so forth. But we are also really curious about any anecdotes or tips or experiences that you have made in the context of change management and process mining. So if you want to add them to the chat, so you can enter the chat very easily just below the video where you're watching this right now. There's a form where you can just fill in your name. You don't need a password, you don't need an account, you just type any kind of name and you say enter the chat, and then you're in there, and during the session you can add notes or ask questions, make comments, and we will keep an eye on them, and we will pick them up and integrate them into the discussion. Okay, so then I would say we are ready to start. So Roger, let's start with your first point. What did you pick for us? Yeah,
the first point, I think it's excellent regarding of projects. When we works with process mining, I think the starting point is always the project charter. And I think this file or this system or this tool define the goals of the project. And from my side, I think it's what is the aim of the project and how can process mining speed it up during this phase. So that's the first thing that I think it's good for discussion.
Okay, yeah. So that you make the project plan, and then in different phases of this project, process mining can play a role.
Yeah, exactly. So when I start with the project in the company or each one, for me it's absolutely incredible. What is the aim of the project, and how can process mining speed it up? So that's a logic question. But the team member during the design of project charter, I think it must be understanding of why the organization exists, not how we can refine or enable the process mining itself. So it's more the culture question and of why the organization exists, where it's going, and how it will get there, enables people to align their actions as well, to innovate, adapt, or the risks during the project with a greater confidence. When defining the scope of project, I think the phases of change, should be considered. The goal of this step is that the driving forces, and what are the driving forces gain the upper hand, and the restraining forces or the resistance forces decline. And when we start with design of project charter, I think this is a good discussion and starting point with change management and alignment of the whole team during the whole project.
Right. Yeah. So is that also like one of the first steps for you, Sebastiaan, defining a project charter?
Yeah, it is. It can be. We'll start with an improvement project, but for me, there's also another phase in this context, because it's when you start in an organization for the first time with process mining, you also have to prepare and make ready the organization itself before you can start with real world projects with real improvement goals, etc., etc. So for me, defining a project and executing a project in a more way of planned change, for me is really important, and I think for every company is important. But when you start with process mining in an organization, it's also important to pay attention on accepting and learning how process mining works. And the period it takes depends from, in my opinion, how familiar an organization is with using data for process improvement purposes. How familiar is an organization with using tools which are a little bit related or similar with process mining. But you have to invest in this period. When you look at change theories, it's interesting, because what Roger tells, executing a project, it's more the variant of planned change. In what way? And when you start with process mining, it's more unpredictable. And in a theory of change management, it's more you can say organizational dynamics. And organizational dynamics, the theory says that change more depends on behavior of people and how they react on change and innovation in an organization. And organizational dynamic, it's in the word, but it says that it's quite unplannable and maybe sometimes some unpredictable. And I think you have to be aware that there are two phases into the project. First, making an organization ready to start with process mining, and after that you can do all the project you want doing in a more planned way, in more project environment.
Yeah, that's also a little bit what I heard, Roger, when you were saying, like making an overview of what could be resistance forces, right, and what could be supporting forces. So is this also what you had in mind a little bit when you were? Yeah. How is this part of the project charter? Maybe take us through this a little bit more.
I think it's a good way to onboard the people and what is their status when we start with a project. And process mining, it's really good to start with, I think it's see the reality. It is clear, and the data, the source of truth is clear, and that it's the beginning of a long journey. But I think only when the mindset of all employees are open and ready for the process of change, and process mining helps them. And this step is absolutely important. And when is this step already done, then is the important step successfully completed. This phase is called, so we have always 3 phases of change: the unfreeze phase, the changing phase, and the freeze phase. And it's absolutely agree with you, Sebastian. When we start with process mining, it's the people on board, and what can we achieve at the beginning of the project, and it's sometimes a little bit called as a important key the leader provide them and the people itself in the project team. I think it's always important. After the freeze phase, it is important or key that the leader does not provide the old world anymore. And with process mining, you can see what happens when you go back to the old world. And it's fantastic with process mining.
That's such an interesting point. I like also the sequence of unfreeze, change, and freeze again. So I didn't know that before, but it makes a lot of sense. It's like when that's what we're talking about when we are talking about change management, right? It's like if you want to change something in an organization, then there is a certain way things are being done right now. So if you want to do things differently, then there's going to be some resistance. And I think most of us know this from ourselves, right? If we are used to doing something in a particular way, even if it could be useful, right? Maybe something on the computer or on the phone, or someone says, well, did you know you can do this? I myself, actually, I'm often like, don't tell me it works like I'm doing it right now. So, and by not being open like that, we may miss out of doing something in a better way, right? So the same thing holds for an organization. So in a way, we need to unfreeze how people are working right now, kind of getting them out of their current patterns and old behaviors and change it, but then also make sure that they stick to the new way of working and don't fall back into how the old familiar patterns again. And I understood from you, Roger, that taking away the old system can be a way to ensure that.
Yeah, I think it's when we define a new world. I don't know. It's more in the company or in the organization. It's also called as a North Star. So that's the heading, and we follow the North Star, and what we use or what we need for the whole journey. So at the beginning of this journey, or when we must achieve the North Star, it is helpful to generate quick wins of the first, 1, 2, 3, 4 steps for the team. And this is also included during the change phase. And I think that is important for the leader. When the people or the team has a firm new way of work or affirm the new processes in the company, I think it's the point that the leader must be canceling, or the leader does not provide the old world and also the data for the people that does not exist anymore. It's important to speed it up and create new momentum for the entire team during the project.
Right. Yes. So let me see. So let me bring up, I think there's not like the perfect way to do it, but let me bring up my first point over here. So I was thinking more of kind of maybe flop 5 lists or kind of pitfalls that people fall into. That, from a process mining perspective. But if you don't get them right, they can really hinder your chances of making the project successful and to really going all the way, right? Because with process mining, you do the analysis, but then you need to interpret what you're seeing and ultimately do something with those insights. And for actually doing those changes and doing those improvements, you need exactly the change management and improvement skills and methods, and all the tools that we are talking about here are useful for that. So one thing maybe as a pitfall that people should avoid if they can is can be told also through a little story. So a company in Germany last year, I was talking to them. They had done some nice projects, some analysis that they were actually quite proud of, and they wanted to continue with it. But then it turned out that they had not involved the workers' council from the organization from the beginning, and they actually had to stop and had to go back and regroup. Completely. So that is kind of an example maybe of not involving the right people. So it's, I think, maybe reflecting back a little bit to what the project charter starting point that you were mentioning, Roger, is like when you start with the project charter, you also think about all the people who are involved on different kind of levels, different stakeholders. It's IT, of course, for getting the data, or other people who are responsible. So that's really something maybe as a takeaway point to keep in mind, to always make sure you involve all the people who need to be involved.
Not only to involve, but just like Roger told, also make a good analysis of all the stakeholders. What are the interests of the stakeholders, etc., etc. You can prevent a lot of problems when you pay attention before you really start with process mining, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Yeah, that's the point. The first point. What is my, or who is my stakeholder, and what is their view or the status actually current and in the future? So I think absolutely important when you start with a project charter and bring and then send down the sound in the team, in the entire team, and what's the focus and which stakeholders are important that helps achieve the goal of the people or the team.
Yeah, and for this, so there are tools, right, in the spectrum of change management methods. So with tools, I mean, like, for example, I've seen a matrix, like kind of with 4 quadrants, where you can categorize like people who are maybe having more influence or on what you want to change, and other people who are really critical that you have them on board, others maybe less so that you can also maybe tune the efforts that you're putting into getting people on board depending on how important they are to make this change, for example.
Absolutely, it can help you make the right analysis, and it can also help you to create the right team and the right coalition to make process mining successful. So a good stakeholder analysis, particularly in big companies with lots of disciplines, is really important to start with.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now let's come to your first point. So Sebastiaan, what's the point you brought?
Oh, my pitfall. I think for me the biggest pitfall was to start with process mining. Just like I told before, I was really familiar with the process. I knew a lot of it. I knew the team. I was able to get the data quite easily. So it was Friday afternoon. I got the data. I started with analyzing also during the weekend, and I did my own analysis. I drew totally my own conclusions, and on Monday I went back to the team and I told, guys, I made the analysis, and these are my conclusions, and this is the improvement potential, etc., etc., etc. And that was a real bad plan, because what I learned from it is when you start with process mining, of course, it's good to make a first start by yourself, but don't do it too long. you have to involve people to build your team as quick as possible, and it's for two reasons. One reason is there's a big risk that you will draw the wrong conclusions, and you will present it to the team, and the team won't accept the conclusion because they are wrong. And second is that it's really important to learn the team step by step how process mining works, and not as detailed as a process miner and analyst should know, but you have to tell step by step the basics, and you have to tell step by step what does process mining say for a specific case, how does the data look like, and how does it look in the real world, and you have to do that step by step, time by time, with the whole team. And after that, you can do everything. You can do a real process mining project. But before you start, you must do it together, and it's not a one-man action process mining. So don't keep it too long by yourself, and start collaborating with the team as soon as possible.
Yes, and it's also I forgot. I had a point I wanted to make. I forgot. But maybe Sebastiaan, exactly one other thing I wanted to ask you also is you at one point in time you explained to me like a little bit the theory of change management. So there's different approaches. Yeah. Overall, right? So could you do that maybe here as well?
Yeah, sure. We told some things before, but I will do it in a more structured way. Just like Roger told, you have several plan change theories, and when you look at the different concepts, you can say roughly there are three theories of plan change, unfreeze, change, and freeze. So that's a theory of plan change, and of course there are a lot of variants on plan change, because you can also maybe some people know the change colors of the Kalue, and these colors tell something about plan change in a way that you can change in a more political way. So it's a yellow change, and you can change more in a real plan change. So it's more almost military form of changing, and that's a blue changing strategy. You can change in a more learning way, but all these colors are more or less a form of plan change. So that's one aspect of change management. On the other hand, you have organizational dynamics, and that theory is more about behavior of people, and it's a theory which says you can make all the plan you want in a changing environment, but a lot of change emerges in a more spontaneous way, and it's in a good organization you need both. So you need plan change because a company needs a strategy and a plan, and it needs clear goals, because otherwise a company can't exist. But in a healthy and a good company, it's nice when you can combine plan change on the other hand with organizational dynamics on the other hand. So that's what the both theories tell. And the third one is one of the theories of Kotter, the 8 steps of changing. And in change management, it's also called best of both worlds. So it contains elements of plan change, but it also contains elements of organizational dynamics. And roughly the 8 steps of Kotter begin at creating of a sense of urgency. Kotter tells a lot, and he's a really fan of sense of urgency. So it's beginning with sense of urgency. It's starting with creating a small coalition. The small coalition starting with doing experiments. So that's a phase which is more related to organizational dynamics. It's books, step by step, first success, and after that it becomes bigger and bigger, and then you get in the phase of that the change is more like the freeze-unfreeze theory of Lewin. So it combines both theories.
And I see Roger nodding a lot, so I think Kotter is indeed one of the resources you really come across in this area. And what we have also done with both of you, we have collected a few links and resources. So together with recording and when we publish the show notes for the session, we will share with all of you some of those resources also beyond the discussion here, so that you can dive deeper and do a little bit of reading. Yeah. And by the way, I remembered what I wanted to say before. It was I wanted to notice, because I recognize it in different places, how communication is very important, and not just like you mentioned at the beginning, Roger, defining the goal through the project charter and having a communication around that, what the plan is, why we are doing this, but also, and that's I heard you, Sebastiaan, say, also to take people with you in terms of what we are doing with process mining, right? That's also something I recognize, by the way. It's like you can show something, but if people don't understand what do these pictures mean, what do the numbers mean there, so that's also why you see people when they're new to process mining, they're kind of following the flows in the process map with their finger and counting the numbers to see, does this map say what I think it is saying, right? Just to understand what you are seeing. And so if you're using process mining analysis results with people who are not process miners themselves, you really have to be careful they don't need to become experts themselves and being able to do all the analysis that you as the process mining analyst are doing, but it's really important to take them on a sufficient level of understanding so that they are comfortable and understand what you're doing.
And that can really be a journey, which is that's sometimes a bit confusing or even disappointing. When you start with process mining, you think, I have the data, and within 1 or 2 weeks we go full speed from improvement project to project. But in most of the times, that's not the case. You have to be patient. You have to do it step by step, and sometimes you have to go 2 steps back to get the right result. But when you not create a certain level of knowledge in the organization, people won't believe what process mining tells, won't trust what process mining tells, and I think that then. From that, it's hardly impossible to implement process mining in a good way in an organization.
Yeah, exactly. I think we probably come back to this even a little bit more in the remainder of the discussion. Maybe before we go to our second rounds of points or tips and tops and flops, we have one question or one comment from the chat I would like to bring in now. So Nick is first of all saying that he likes the discussion, so that's great. Thanks, Nick.
Okay.
And then he's asking, how do you justify to a client going from using process mining to support a single specific change project to justifying building a wider process mining capability within the business? For example, to identify future change projects, not just support existing projects. So if I understand him correctly, it's about not just being the change management or process improvement team who then uses process mining to support these initiatives they would be doing anyway, but maybe to branch out a little bit and use process mining also to identify opportunities and start projects in that way. Is there something that comes to mind when you hear this?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. More or less, keep it simple and visual. So when we start with process mining, sometimes the people are not yet confusing. So it's a good question of, it is in the company defined and selected team that works with process mining, or is process mining part of daily work in the company? So that's, I think it's a good point for discussion with the leader. Why? I think it's important. So I think it's a slogan: leader helps people and leader helps leader. So that is, it's on focus. It's keep it simple and visual in the regular daily basis works. For example, when you talk about what are the bottleneck in the value stream or in our value stream in the company. With process mining, the process mining team identify the bottleneck absolutely fast. But the people in the value stream and the leader needs more time for the same view. And I think it's a good point to discuss and go back with the leaders and with the process mining team out in the company, out in the value stream, and go and observe the problem and collect the problem. And after then start with, for example, a root cause analysis with the team and the leader in the entire company. So that's my input for that question.
Mm. Mm. Do you want to add something, Sebastiaan? Or?
No, not really. I totally agree with that. I think that the biggest chance of having success in this way is creating a very broad team and to keep all options in the beginning open, or how you're going to organize process mining within an organization, and what choices an organization will make. You can't predict it, but the biggest chance for success is creating step by step a broad team with all members, with all with all disciplines within the team, and then is my expectation the answers will come.
Yeah, maybe that's the one addition that I would have perhaps on this particular question is also that I think it's actually really good to position process mining in an existing process improvement team, if there is a team that's specializing on supporting process improvements in the company already, because because of the reason why we are talking about this topic here today is that if you're, for example, positioning it on the IT side or somewhere where someone lacks a little bit this kind of full change management, process improvement practice, then it's much harder for them to really make the change in the organization to create the success that should be achieved in the first place. So I think it's really good to start to use process mining to support existing teams like that, and maybe branch out from there and broaden their expertise to unlock more opportunities in the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so now before we go to the second round, we have one second comment I would like to incorporate. And Markus is saying, I have a problem with different terms, project, change, process, being used in some way in the IT service management world. There's a clear definition of change and change management, and the change is described by a process and the implementation is then a project. And this is a really good point. I like, in one of the past cafes, we actually had a kind of a running list of terms that could be ambiguous if you're talking about it in different contexts and in different industries. And you're absolutely right, Markus. I think for change management, in terms of IT service management, it's much more defined. And actually, what we are talking about here today is much broader. It's more taking the perspective of identifying improvements, could be even some radical change, and how to get that in the organization, to be successful in the organization. But at the same time, for many of the changes that will be made, for example, if you have to make changes in the systems, or ultimately there will be a lot of actual change management processes, like in the IT service management sense that he's talking about, right? But it's a nice recognition that actually we do use the terms a little bit more broadly here. So that's good to keep in mind always, terminology, right? Who you're talking with and how they see this. Okay, so then I would say let's come to our second round of points. And if I paid attention, then I think, Roger, your first point is the first step in the Kotter model. Is this correct? Or
the Levin's theory and also the Kotter model, so for the three phases that we have discussed, and also the naming of, resistance or restraining forces, and which are the driving forces during these phases. It is important to must be identify first, and go and beyond with the people, empower and involve everyone. So that's a good start when we start with the project charter or define the project charter.
And it's specifically you're talking about the sense of urgency, right?
Exactly. Sebastiaan has also this wording, the sense of urgency. It is absolutely powerful word. The sense of urgency. So it's a combination of why and what is the reason of common change and combination of build up the focused communication. And it was also at the beginning of when we start with project charter, who, when, where, what we must be communicate with the company or with the people during this change. The holistic journey regarding of three phases that we have discussed at the front of them. I think it is good or better see the reality and be focused on the content with the right facts and figures. So that I think it's important when we talk about of the sense of urgency. And process mining, it's absolutely helpful to see the current situation. That's real. That's not fake. That's real. And also it's important for the organization or most organizations create barriers after them that make it very difficult for people to see and tell the truth about what they see. I think so. Fundamental to common change is the concept of teaching people the key principles of why. And this in combination of the sense of urgency. So what you're saying is that process mining can help maybe to create a sense of urgency because you can make a problem that is there more apparent, more visible, for example. Yeah, exactly. It's real, and it's a part of, the dump of our ERP system in the entire company, and that it's also a question of the behavior behind them, of every individual, of the figures, of the data in the company, and that is a famous discussion. And it's great to start that discussion with all involved people and process owner, subject matter experts, for example, in the IT or in the planning or in the production side. That is a good start. And when you talk about see the reality and be focused and the why, and it is important during the sense of urgency, what is the facts and figures of this, and what is the common language, the same language that we need to achieve, and we talk about of the same goals regarding of the sense of urgency.
Yeah. And how do you, so that's something I'm personally also interested in. So one of the aspects of creating a sense of urgency is, why do we need to change something now, right? We have been working in this way all these years, so maybe we could do something about this next year, or we're all busy right now. So how is there some tips maybe to increase this sense of urgency, to do something now?
Yeah, I think it's the people understand why. I think they become empowered to take personal initiatives when the people understand why we change this process, and what is our responsibility behind the figures. And this is, I think, it's one of the biggest goal, or one way to challenge the change with the involved people or the subject matter experts in the project.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So that's a really important tip we'll take on our way. So maybe I'm picking up my second point. So my second, it's a second flop. I made a list of flops, but of course you can always turn it around into an opportunity. It's like what you shouldn't be doing is to ignore privacy and ethics questions. And so we have actually talked about this also in past Process Mining Cafés, for example, in the one with Leonard Studer from the city of Lausanne. I will link those again also in the show notes. One thing that he recommended is to draw up an ethical charter. So not just the project charter in the beginning to make the project plan, but an ethical charter that very clearly says, like, why are we doing this, but also what are we not doing with this. So for example, in such an ethical charter, you could be very clear about we are not going to measure the performance of employees, but we want to improve the customer experience, or, being really clear about what you want to achieve. And this can also help, and that's, I think, why it's relevant also for the change management topic that we discuss here today. It can help people to build up trust in what you're doing with process mining, because process mining can make things very transparent, right? So that's one thing that I think many of us have noticed, and many companies have noticed. They start visualizing processes. Maybe the person doing it is really excited and shows around like what they can do, but there are other people who see that who are starting to get frightened, because now everyone can see every little steps and every little rework step and every little deviation that happens. So this transparency can put people at unease. So I think building this trust that what is being done in an ethical way and not in a reckless way is like an important step that can help build that trust and get better success, I think. Yeah.
So I think that's a good point, the ethical charter. So it's a combination of, or I think it's respect every individual regarding of our principles in the entire company. When you have principles and systems in the company, and values, process mining is a system, that's great. Respect every individual, and we measure the process and not the people behind the process.
And usually that's the case, right? Usually we want to make the process better and remove idle times or unnecessary queuing somewhere or something. It's not about the one person who is too slow and who should now work faster or something. That's not the point. But
exactly.
But at the same time, people get frightened easily. And on the other hand, it's also not unheard of that a manager somewhere is kind of using numbers that they get from somewhere to put pressure on a certain department, or I don't know, maybe for political gains or something. So so that's, I think, something people are afraid of, and maybe have a reason also a little bit sometimes. Okay, so I think that's a learning point we can take on. What's your second point you brought for us, Sebastiaan?
My second is related to the first. Is building a team, and you need to build a team as quick as possible, and in my opinion, the most important is to look for the people who really know in depth how the process works in real life, and you have to look to knowledge of how the data looks like, people who can get the right data, and also can give the right explanation on what the data tells. And that's the most important to start with your process analysis. And on the other hand, you don't have to forget the other disciplines in the organization. But my advice is start with a team as quick as possible, but try to get the knowledge of the process and the data. And after that, you're going to expand it step by step, the other disciplines. And no, there's not an ideal order of get the right disciplines in the right moment. I think you will have to experience that that, and you will have to listen to the people and to what you see during the analysis, and after that you will draw your own conclusions of our team has now this disciplines on board. Okay, in the next step we have to involve this discipline and this discipline and this discipline. So do it step by step, but pay a lot of attention on building the right team, and do it step by step. And there is not an ideal order. You have to experience by yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, when we talk from a process mining perspective, like building the right team, so for example, having someone on board who is familiar with, for example, process improvement or project management, change management, if it's kind of an improvement project here in this case, for example, it's like one of the tips that we give, or one of the people you want to have on board on the team. Now, you're coming from the already project manager and change management perspective. Who are the people who you want to have on your team? The different subject matter experts, or different also skills or kind of roles?
Yeah, it depends. In my experience, I know a lot about change management and a lot about Lean Six Sigma and doing a project. So for me, it's knowledge I have by myself, and I can also make analysis in process mining. So I'm quite. My knowledge is quite extensive, but the things you mentioned, Anna, are all important. So when you start as a project manager, but you don't have the experience with change management, my advice would be involve someone who is familiar in doing change projects and change management, together with the people who really know how the process works and how the data is built up. So I think that these are the disciplines you have to start with: change management, project management, knowing something about the process itself, knowing about the data. So that for me, that's a good, almost ideal start for process mining. And after that, it's you have to be aware that you have to involve the other disciplines. And when you do it in the ideal way, you do it just like Roger told. You first start with a stakeholder analysis, and maybe it's a good idea during the project you make an update on that on the stakeholder analysis. So you make the right connections with the right people. But sometimes it's surprising during a project. People show up and want to be part of a process mining project. Now, my advice would be never reject it. Come on board. Would be my advice. That can also be helpful. So.
Excellent. Yeah, probably good advice. So maybe if I see it correctly, maybe this leads a little bit as a transition quite nicely to your third point, Roger.
My third point, it's a good discussion and a little bit reflecting some points. My next point is the source of truth. When we talk about process mining data analysis, why the source of truth is a combination of process mining, and is also important who is responsible for the data. And it is, for example, at the front of discussion, a subject matter expert or IT guy, I don't know, and who is responsible for that one. And also, where is the data available? In some companies, not yet all data are available right now. Has some barriers of governance or IT governance, or each one. And the third is what our initial findings when to start with collect the right data for the process mining. And that's also the first step of change management. No, I'm not responsible for this data. That's responsible for the other one. A huge discussion with the people. That's great. That's fantastic regarding of change management. And also, why do we have this quality of this data currently? When we start and we collect the data for at the front of the beginning of start with process mining, so that it's absolutely famous, interesting with the people in the company. And the question are usually already asked when creating the project charter at the front of them. If the question are answered and clear in the project, the source of truth should always clarify. That's important. And when we start with process mining in the project or anyway, the source of truth is always the same. And he's responsible, and the behaviors behind them, looks like the figure behind the figure. I don't know what's going on. It's more who is responsible for the data and what is the behavior of every individual of this data in the entire company. Yeah. So that's for me important. The source of truth must be absolutely identified, and it's always the North Star for the process mining team or the leader or the sponsors in the projects.
Right. If I understand you correctly, so it's about identifying where the data is, who's responsible for it, and also then responsible for, for example, improving the data quality, things like that. At the same time, I can also imagine that the trust or what people think, where people think the truth is, that's in another aspect, right? Because I have heard, especially like if you're talking to people who are coming from the classical, let's say, Lean Six Sigma side, then often they say, well, they don't trust, for example, data that's in the IT systems or somewhere. They only trust the data if they collected it themselves. And then there's certain validation mechanisms that you can use, that you measure something 5 times and then you average it and you see that, you have reliable data somehow. So, how's that with process mining now compared to your general experiences? Are people using the data and able to trust the data if you validate it, or do you still sometimes see that people say, well, that's not my source of truth, I know, what my gut feeling says, or think about it differently?
No, all of them. I think it's the way to collect the data in the company regarding of discussion of the leaders and the owners, the process owners. The first question is always, why do you need this data? For what? What the hell? It's what's going on. So that was the first touching point when we collect the data for the process mining. And the second one is it feels the vibration of resistance sometimes. Oh, that's important data. That absolutely important data for the company and the processes and the process owner. Yeah, that's true. Absolutely with you, no problem. But at the end of the day, the data generates a new way, in the best case, a new way of work or a new way define a new processes for the future. And also, it is possible to bring and speed up a new value proposition in the company or for the customers. I don't know. So I think it's a good starting point when we talk about what is the source of truth of the data and what is the resistance and the restraining forces of every individual. When I ask, okay, give me the data from this period in this section or in these processes, that there's a good discussion with the process owner, the starting point.
Yeah, I'm curious, Sebastiaan, do you have similar experiences? So usually the data can be used, or do you sometimes see kind of people not trusting the data?
Oh, definitely, because in a big organization like NN Group, most disciplines are quite separated from each other, and that's why that it's so important to build the right team and to start the right discussion. So people collect the data, and of course, when you show it in process mining, the process expert will say, "Oh, what I say here is not right," or "I don't believe that it's so bad," etc., etc. But in my experience, what happened after that was that the discussion started. So the process expert looked at, what did you exactly? What did you query on the system, etc., etc. And when that discussion starts, real collaboration, real communication within your team, things are becoming clear, and then people can draw the right conclusion, and that can be it is correct. The process is that bad, but it can also be that there's something wrong with the query which is made. So for me, I can recognize it, and in my experience, is collaboration between all these disciplines is key, and it's one of my points I noted here. Creating a safe environment, safe in the most broad way, safe environment is key to be successful.
Yeah. Feeling safe to
learn, feeling safe to make faults, feeling safe that there is no blaming culture, blaming or shaming culture because of the reason that the process is not that good as we expected, etc., etc. That's why I understand the concept of safe. Not only that you follow the rules and all the restrictions there are in a company. That's also important. Don't get me wrong, but for me, most of all, it's important to create a safe environment in your team, so all things can be discussed.
It's great. So I think when we create 3 words, I don't know, within discussion. So I think it's affected, involved, and responsible. So that is so the phases when we start with give me the data. So that was for me the 3 words that around in my head. So when I listen to people, why do you need this data? So that's the point of he is responsible for that one. Oh, great! You are part of change management. Welcome on board. You are a big part of a team, But it's great for discussion with the guys regarding of you are responsible for the data and the change, and that's great. That's, I think, absolutely fantastic. Affected, involved, and responsible. I make a notice after this discussion. That's great.
That's really great. Yeah. Also, the whole notion that you need to put together the right team, right? That Sebastiaan, you emphasized it again. That's actually also tied in nicely to my third point. So my next point was also about expectations and how do you work together? Because maybe a flop or kind of a red flag would be if you are confronted with some manager who's responsible for a certain process in the organization, and that manager is crossing their arms and says, kind of, surprise me, tell me something I don't know yet, or something like that, right? Because that shows that they don't have the right understanding about what process mining is and how it works, and that you actually need their support, and they need to provide, maybe not their own time, but they need to provide resources from their department to help the project team to understand the subject matter dimensions of what you're analyzing and to understand what is going on, right? So it's again coming back to setting up the right team in the right way with the right expectations.
Yeah. Especially the right expectations, because especially in the first phase, first period when you start with process mining, in my opinion, there can only be one expectation, and that is the expectation of implementing process mining successfully, and not what Anna said before, a manager who wants a direct result, big process improvements, etc., etc. That's a phase that will come after that. But in the first phase, you have to be aware, and that should be the commitment of all the people together in an organization, that you have to implement the process mining tool successfully. That's the first. When you achieve that's a great success and a big result. And after that, you can do all the big things you want with great process improvements, etc., etc., etc. But that comes after that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe expectations are also a good good transition to another question that was asked in the chat. So let me bring that in here. So Nick is asking, how do you help stakeholders how do you help stakeholders see the value in the initial data extraction / modeling? I often work on projects where it's easy to get budgets to build dashboards, but not so easy to get budget to build more reliable ETL workflows. They can't help but see a rush to dashboards as a way to shorten time to value than on a process mining project. So I think what I am understanding he's asking is like, it's not like one IT project where you have kind of a product in the end where you can monitor a certain KPI or something, kind of an extension of the infrastructure for the daily operations. But with process mining, it's different, right? You tap into the data to really get this understanding about the process, but to analyze it, and there can be many different things that you do with that, and many different projects that you can do for different processes, or even the same one. Does that resonate with you? Something that comes to mind based on his question?
So I think it's a good question regarding of what is the goal, or what is the value proposition of the company, of their, organization. So I think process mining helps stabilizing the process in the entire company. Why? It creates, consistency and reliability, and it's the basis for the problems identification. You can quicker, faster identify the sense of urgency in the entire process in the company, and also you can create an elevator pitch for the team in the company regarding of empower and involve everyone, and that's regarding of who is responsible of stability of the processes. So that's the point from my side. It helps absolutely when you work with process mining.
Yeah, and I think maybe what we said before also a little bit was, and I think both of you mentioned this in different places, that you start small, right? So I think that's a good thing. You can really just get a first data extract prepared and do some work based on that, and then you can iterate and you can look at other processes, or you can look at the data more deeply. Or so it doesn't have to be, also the budget doesn't have to be there for everything at once, but you can start small and show the successes that you have based on this method, and by doing that, build make your case over time.
And try to compare the result with doing it in a more classical way. In my experience with process mining, you can show a process quite easily, which will take you in a classical way with brown paper and a lot of people and a lot of discussion. It will take you maybe days, maybe even weeks to get insight in the process. And when you have the right data, for process mining, maybe it's a matter of hours or maximum a few days. So I think it's good to tell that story. So show step by step small things, but also try to make a relation with doing this in the classical way. I think that this will help to provide more motivation to go further with process mining.
Absolutely. I agree, Sebastiaan. Absolutely. I think it's a combination, or the question is, what is the perfect storm of improvements in the entire company or in the organization? I think it's process mining is helpful, quicker, and you identify faster some constraint in our processes. And then it's the question of the leaders. We are ready for a deep dive regarding of go and observe, or that's it. So that's the next point. And then I think it's first of all is analyze the data with process mining, and then you have the first picture, the clear picture. What is the picture and what is the constraint in our process, and then it's time to go deep dives with the people regarding of brown papers or anyway. So that makes sense, absolutely, a combination of two, the perfect storm of analysis in the entire company.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Yes. Okay, so maybe let's come to the third point. Sebastiaan, what was your third point?
Yeah, my third point, I told some things before, was creating the safe environment, but I told this before. Maybe I will pick another one, is really understanding what's going on. It's related on what we discussed before, but it's really important when you start with process mining and start in an organization, that you really pay attention on really understanding what's going on and in a process. And it's more important for me to make an analysis on a small and quite simple process and understand it deeply, so you can explain everything of what's going on in the process, instead of going after big processes which are very complex, lot of data, and which is hardly to understand what's really going on. Try to keep it small. Try to understand it deeply. Try to communicate to all the people, all the organization, of what's going on in the process, and after that, it's a more you can go further with more complex processes, etc. But keep it simple.
I like that a lot. I think going deep is really important to understand. A small piece of the process really well can also help you. I think in terms of change management. That sometimes people are doing certain things because of a certain reason, right? So it's easy sometimes to look at a process and to say, well, this could be done completely differently. But when you take the time and really also talk with the people who are doing it the way they are doing it now, and you ask them, why are you doing it this way? Why are we not doing it in this or that way? Then you maybe learn their reasons behind the reasons that you saw, and so forth, and so on and so forth. And only when you understand everything really deeply, you can make the right recommendation. That's also the right one for the project.
I like the approach. When we talk about small pieces, that's a good idea and good approach. Sometimes the little bit the people or the involved project team are confused. A lot of data, a lot of swim lanes, a lot of processes. Yeah. And I think it makes sense. Make small steps, small pieces, and be honest and explorative. So I think that's a good approach for the entire organization. And I think it's also, you are not a servant leader when you have no facts and figures at the same time. You need facts and figures, and when you have small pieces, you can speed it up and coaching the people. And again, leader helps leader at the end of the day, and he needs small succession stories. And then it is important for the team and the organization, recognition. So that speed it up, and it gives a massive input and motivates the team and goes hand in hand forward regarding of change management. When see the people, that was great, that was a small step for us, but was a big step for the complexity of the project. It's absolutely helpful. That's great.
That's such an important point, yeah. So if I understand you correctly, you're talking also with this recognition about the recognition in the team. So it's not just that the people in the team are safe to do and to explore different things, but also that their work is actually being rewarded and appreciated and recognized, as you said. I like that. That's good to keep in mind for everyone, being involved in a project like that? And so Sebastiaan is also nodding, right?
Yeah, sure. All these things apply on building a good team. So for process mining, it's not different. You always have to pay attention on these aspects, and just like Roger told, build it step by step and prepare that the change, especially in the beginning, is unpredictable. So it's a bit non-linear. Sometimes you go 2 steps forward, some one back, but it's no problem. It will become stable one moment. But sometimes you have to be patient, and that's no problem. You don't have to be worried about.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Maybe, well, we're running a little long. We could talk forever, but I would say let's pick each one last point. So let's make a closing round, and each of us pick one of the one last point for this closing session. So, Roger, which point do you want to pick?
Yeah, the next point is I call this value of tears. So it's interesting. Let me say in following sentence. Before a major change is launched, I think a North Star should be established and in place. That's more so true North thinking. The whole organization must be understand and be able to explain it. When I ask staff in the shop floor, for example, okay, do you know what is the vision mission of our company? And the people say sometimes, no, I have no idea. I don't know. So that's so sometimes a little bit the feedback. But we have in the company a clear focus, a clear mission, and the North Star for the entire plant, for example. But I think it's sometimes that a little bit frustrating for the people in the company, or when the process mining team starts. Okay, I don't know what's the North Star or what's going on and what is the goal of this project. So that's the beginning of a huge discussion. And I think this feedback loops or is helpful so that the team spirit is not lost. When we talk about and we following the North Star and the goal of the project, I think it's important. And when you have this discussion, so that the team spirit is not lost, and or the complete team are on board. If the path on the goal is not clear, so sometimes raise your hand and ask why. Do not go back in our office door, close the door, and start with frustrating. It's more go out, raise up the hand and ask why. For example, so I think it's a good example. It's the mountain climber. So when he goes up to the mountain, at the peak of the mountain, it's a good example. He has a very specific route in our mind and follow it exactly to the top of the mountain. Once he has reached the intermediate goal or place, so small step, he reflects on his mental strengths and their behavior of the team behind him. And only if the next step clear, then those he continue and he goes on and go forward and achieve the goal or the peak of the mountain. I think it's important that team knows the way to the next place and the behavior of every individual at the goal and their behavior behind them. So I think it's good for the team. Go fast and ask why when it is not clear what is the goal. So that it's for me. So it's called as a value of the tears during a process, during a change.
Yeah, that's when you said value of tears. in the beginning, I think I understood it in a different way, but the way you were describing it is, I think, really, really interesting. I thought you were talking about kind of when you make a change in the organization, ultimately there's maybe a lot of people who have to change the way they are working now, right? That's what we talked about before. You were maybe used to doing it this way. Now someone comes and says, well, now we are going to reorganize this process a little bit. We are doing it this way, so that the people who actually have to change on a day-to-day basis, they don't want to, they have to get used to it, and that they have to get through the valley of tears, let's say. But what you're saying, and I think that's a really good point, is that the project team itself, they have this this timeline of a project, and they want to be successful with the project, but they could hit certain phases in the project where they don't seem to maybe be able to make the impact that they hoped, or they don't get the buy-in, or don't know why. That's what you were saying, right? If they don't maybe lose the North Star, that's the most dangerous one. So is that more that it's more reflecting on the project team itself, or the Valley of Tears?
No, I think it's both sides. The team itself, it is important. So the trust in the team of every individual, and the trust also to the sponsors. I think, and the other one is to the Valley of Tears in the entire company for the process owner or the subject matter experts. That helps and creates the goal and helps to achieve the goal in the company. So I looks like both of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very, very good. Good point. Now, my fourth and last point is a quick one. We have talked about trust a lot already, so it's also relevant in that dimension. And the advice here would be for the process miner to not skip over the data quality checks, the data validation phase, because it can really easily happen otherwise that if you're too eager and jumping into the data and presenting them the first results that you get from that as your analysis results, you could get a situation where you show this to someone and they look at it and they say, well, that can't be true, right? That's impossible, for example. And then you dig into the data and you find out, okay, the reason for that is that there were some data quality problems that you hadn't found yet. So then you can go back and you can fix the data quality problem. But when you then come back to the same person and present the updated results, then most likely you will have lost their trust, and they don't see this anymore as a source of truth, right? We were talking about how important the data is as a source of truth in the process mining and the improvement project. And so that's why it's really important to take the steps in the beginning to validate the data. And for this, you can also involve the people who are the domain experts. And if you involve them in the data validation, deliberately saying, well, we are not analyzing yet, we first want to make sure the data is good, then you build their trust in the data at the same time, and you ensure that you catch any kind of big problems and have really a good sense of the data quality once you go in the analysis phase. So that would be a tip I would give everyone working on process mining. Brings us to your last point, Sebastiaan. So what would you...
my last topic during this Process Mining Café is seeking perfection. And my statement is that you have to look for perfection in the execution of process improvement projects, and using process mining, of course, but you have to combine it with excellent change management, and they both come together. In my opinion, process mining is not able to exist without doing change management in the right way, and maybe vice versa. So seeking perfection has more aspects, doing the right analysis, but also doing and making change management in the right way.
But is then seeking perfection, is it like perfect being the enemy of the good, or so that you can try to be too perfect? Or are you saying the opposite, that it's good to take something small and make it really good?
Oh, no, the opposite. It can't be perfect in the first steps. You've always have to be in search for perfection. I'm convinced of that. But you have also be aware that every step in the right way counts. So it doesn't have to be perfect in the beginning. Oh, definitely not. But you always have to be in search for it. You can try at least.
Yeah. Oh no, but I would definitely also agree very strongly with that. You sometimes see that when people collect data for process mining and they realize there are some manual steps in there, for example, right? You could say, well, we can't analyze this process until we have digitized or captured this manual step, but you can. You just need to be aware that you have a blind spot in this part of the process.
Oh, definitely.
And you can analyze the rest of it. So,
even process mining is not perfect.
No, far from it.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's great. Strive for perfection. Absolutely great, Sebastiaan. And I say sometimes fail early and learn early.
Yeah.
And this is so important for the people and the team when he works with process mining and goes, with brown paper of deep dives in the processes. Yeah. And seek perfection, strive for perfection. It's an aspiration, and gives a pursuit and creates more momentum in the future. And it's a long-term view, and it's not limited. It's open, and that's a principle and a knowledge that I think it's important in the company when he starts with a long-term journey regarding of what's the biggest North Star that we need that we create within the next 10, 20 or I don't know years in the company. That's great. Seek for perfection.
Yeah, and start small, right? So this is where we came back in multiple places. So starting small but knowing where you want to go. So I think this combination that's really, really powerful. Well, thank you so much for this really enjoyable discussion. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things. We have seen how important the human factor is in improvement projects, and I hope that all of you have were able to take away some of the points that you can use for your own process mining work. I want to thank you, Roger and Sebastiaan, for sharing your experiences. Thanks so much for coming on board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like we said before, we will compile a little bit of a list of resources and tips and some links that we think could be useful for you to learn more if you want to dive even deeper into the topic of change management. And thank you all for watching, for joining our cafe, for discussing with us. We will be back with the next Process Mining Café very soon, and the topic will be Lean Six Sigma. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks again, Roger, Sebastiaan. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.